Okay, welcome to the 28th episode of an Evolving Man podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to Ulf Sandstrom. He is a Swedish trauma facilitator working to ease suffering and prevent violence by spreading methods of trauma relief and resilience to stress. Together with Gunilla Hamne, he is a co-founder of the Peaceful Heart Network, a non-profit active in over 30 countries in areas where conflict and natural disasters have left people vulnerable and hypervigilant. They have received the ACEP Humanitarian Award for their work, developed the trauma tapping technique, which they talk about in this amazing book here, conducted studies on the effects of it on children liberated from armed forces in DR Congo, and developed free tools like the app Self-Help for Trauma in 27 languages. Ulf works with individuals and teams looking to regain control of life and to develop organic self-leadership skills, combining trauma tapping with havening techniques, neuro-linguistic programming, hypnosis, clean language, and mental training. Welcome, Ulf.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. It's really lovely to speak to you. I've been reading your book over the last few days, and it's like, yeah, really inspiring stories in there. So how I would love to begin is just for you to share a little bit your own journey. What got you into doing this amazing work you're doing now, please?
Oh, thanks, Pierre. So, yeah, I think people who work in the healing arts or therapeutic or coaching or whatever, helping or social services or whatever it may be, have usually some kind of experience of their own. And my experience was growing up in, my dad was in the Foreign Service. So I grew up in a lot of different countries, went to a lot of different schools. I lived in 3 different dictatures, police states, communism. So we lived in Hungary during the Soviet rule. We lived in Spain under military dictator Franco. We lived in Argentina and Cuba, lived in the US under Nixon. So, I mean, I saw a wide variety of societies and cultures, which made me aware that people are very different and they're also very much the same. And that in societies that had repressive governments, there was a specific kind of trauma that very few spoke about. And in societies where everything is possible, there's another kind of trauma, because trauma is part of being human.
Yeah.
And you could say we actually got the choice when I was 15 and my sister was 18. We'd been traveling around in 7 different countries, gone to 11 schools. And our parents said, we're going to be going to a new country now. What do you want to do? Do you want to go with us? Do you want to go to a boarding school in Sweden? Or do you want to stay at home and just continue as business as usual? We'll send you some money to pay the rent every month. And we both went and checked out a boarding school. There are not that many in Sweden. And we said, I think we'll take a shot at just doing this on our own.
Okay, wow.
So we entered the boarding school of life at 15.
Okay. Wow. Okay, amazing. Thank
Yeah,
you.
from there I went on to work with as a musician from early age. So I took a sailing training. I was a merchant Navy sailor. I did military training. It was mandatory at the time. And I could have continued in those, but then I said, nah, it's going to be music. So I finished construction engineering, the gymnasium level construction engineer, never used that, and started touring and working with music. And one thing led to another. I kind of always had, some kind of extra job on the side because music is not done 24/7. So I slipped on a banana peel into working with developing lighting control systems for stage and entertainment in a very large company, ended up in the US. And that was exciting. But the core business was music. And through music, I met this guy who was a hypnotist. And I said, why in the world would you ever want to hypnotize somebody? He said, it's cool. You can do it on stage and you can have people let go of traumas. And I was like, what do you mean let go of trauma? And he said, well, phobias, whatever. Everybody has something. It's a defense system. It's not a disease. Every trauma is your nervous system's way of defending you against something should it happen again. So I call PTSD perpetuating traumatic stress defense system. And my wife had one. she had seen Jaws and a lot of movies about sharks and the James Bond movie with golden teeth and everything. So she was like, she really couldn't even swim in a pool without expecting the floor to open and a shark to eat her.
Wow.
So I called her up and I said, I have this crazy hypnotist here. Would you, he says he can relieve you of your shark phobia. And she says, sure. How many sessions? And she was thinking like, 10, 15, that seems to be a normal time. And he looked at me, over his shoulder. He said, what time? Oh, around 20 minutes, maybe. Maybe we'll keep going for 40. I don't know. And I was like, that sounds too good to be true. But she wanted it. She did it. And she came back and there was no shark phobia. So that blew my mind away. I was like, wow, this is cool. And that's how I decided I would learn more about hypnosis, more about neurolinguistic programming, which basically, if you don't know what it is, it's it's a way of labeling our experience, structuring and labeling our experience of life, our subjective life experience. And by labeling it and structuring it, it's possible to change it. And then I finally found that I needed a tool that would work with anxiety and trauma, which is body-based. It's not intellectual. You can know you have a phobia for spiders. You can joke about it. You will still scream if you believe there's one on you. So I was fascinated by the whole separation of trauma being a defense, and it's not intellectual, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. And sometimes it backfires. So I kept looking for a way to resolve that more efficiently than any talk therapy I had run into, or even hypnosis. And I ran into a woman who was traveling around post-conflict in the genocide of Rwanda and leading groups where groups of people were able in groups to resolve their individual traumas without even talking about it. And that blew my mind away. So I sent her an email and she said, yeah, next time I'm in Sweden, look me up and I'll show you. And that's what she did. And I really thought it was impressive. And I asked her, what's the science? And she said, I'm not completely sure. So my engineer hat got back on and I said, let's find out. So we went both to Rwanda and started working together, founded a nonprofit called the Peaceful Art at Work. And we, from there, we've been developing the trauma tapping to work in large populations, cross-culturally, without spoken intervention, because it's not necessary. And of course, since I see clients like 3 days a week in my place in Stockholm, so I mix it with everything else and experiment and see what works best. And through the experiences we've gained in so many countries, we now have, that's how I also ran into havening techniques, because Dr. Rudin in New York had studied tapping, and the science of how trauma is encoded and can be decoded with a body-mind approach was the basis of his hypothesis for his book, When the Past is Always Present. So we contacted him and we changed experiences. I learned havening, and they complement each other. They build on the same science. And it's just been fascinating, because it is fascinating that you can resolve trauma. It is fascinating that it's not chronic. It's fascinating that anybody can learn to do it, as easy as mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So I kind of became an activist journey. If it's this easy, why are people medicating or walking around in fear or locking themselves in at home, or being reactive and aggressive and picking fights in bars when they don't need to?
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for doing this work. I was reading your book and I'm like, wow, it's so inspiring.
Oh, I'm happy it's inspiring. That's our whole intention, to inspire people. I mean, everybody is a hero in the making.
Yeah. I think what kind of really struck me was, I think, as I was sharing before we began, a lot of my work is with the trauma around boarding school or attachment trauma. So someone is, childhood trauma. And I noticed that a lot of people struggle to, say, heal from that. And the way I use is EFT and matrix reimprinting. I think
they're great methods.
I first trained in 2000, and I used it on myself at the beginning. But reading your book is like, wow, this is amazing that this can work in a war-torn place like Rwanda, and some of the stories of people who've not been able to sleep, or people have thought they were possessed by demons. And it's like, wow. So just really fascinated there. So, I mean, would you be able to share a little bit about your experience of trauma, and this idea, emotional and mental trauma? Because I see that sometimes people come to me, and they say, well, nothing big happened to me. I didn't necessarily get beaten up, but it was more something on an emotional level. Like you said, everyone has some form of trauma. So would you be able to just explain a little?
Okay. Yeah. So I would say, I mean, this is my experience and my opinions. And when it comes to science, there is consensus about a lot of things, but there's absolutely not consensus about everything. There's not even consensus about what consciousness actually is. And do we or don't we have a subconscious, and what are, so
You've just frozen there for a second.
So defamation in a social media or something, I mean, an image that gets, on the loose and makes you lose your face in your community, it's so different, what it is. And I don't know if I would make a difference between emotional and mental trauma, because trauma is when your body goes into defense when something triggers it. And like you said, the old in the DSM, the old definition of trauma was that you had to have experienced something really traumatic. But see, the deal with trauma for me is something happens when you're a kid. It's not really that severe, and you survive it, you move on, and then you move through life and something else happens which reminds you of that. And it could be 20 years between those two. And then something else happens. And the sum of those three make the first one become a trauma later in life. So since your amygdala, your reptile brain, it doesn't have a sense of time. It doesn't care if it happened yesterday or 30 years ago or 5 minutes ago. It just sums up, this is dangerous. And if you want to know if you have any kind of trauma, which if you don't, you wouldn't be human. I mean, anybody put their hands on a stove and they pull it back, they're not going to do it 3 times more, That's a post-traumatic stress defense. And then you have complex trauma, which is a series of things happen throughout your life that one by one maybe weren't so bad, or maybe they were bad all the time, and the sum is inseparable from everything else. So I kind of like to turn it around and say, if you react in a way that is inappropriate or very reactive or more defensive than necessary to anything, I would say there's a 99.9% chance there's what we call a prior encoding moment. Something happened early in life that makes you overreact now, because you're not only reacting to now, you're also reacting to what happened earlier. So it's a defense system. And what the impact is when these reactions are not dealt with is that a person who normally is very relaxed and happy and jovial, unless somebody presses their button, and then they all of a sudden they can flip and become very aggressive or irritated or sad, and maybe go into depression several months out of nowhere, because that was a soft spot. So instead of being hijacked by that reaction, you can actually resolve it, and which is basically like fine trimming your defense system back to where it is appropriate to be right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yeah, I think I heard that, I can't remember the exact acronym, but it's NICAB. So it's the Society of Psychologists and Psychiatrists. And I think it was Bessel van der Kolk talking, one of the trauma experts, saying we have extrinsic trauma. So something happens, a car crash, something which is obvious. And then you've got intrinsic, more the emotional. And they say that's the emotional, the mental, that's the one which is more insidious almost, because it's not obvious. I remember when I left school, I was like, well, nothing really bad happened to me. But then in my 20s, I was suddenly suicidal. I tried to take my own life. And I'm like, but why? And then it was like, as I started to unpick, it was like, yeah, it was intrinsic. I didn't necessarily have extrinsic, obvious things happen to me, but it was a building up and a building up and a building up. So yes, that makes total sense. So thank you.
And I would like to add that, the way we regard trauma in the model of Rudin and many other scientific models, because there are many, it's trauma is personal.
Yes.
So it has a couple of conditions. You are in a place where your normal resilience isn't enough to handle this situation, which means if you're super stressed, a small thing could be traumatic. If you're not stressed at all, a big thing, it needs to happen for it to be traumatic. And that's called, your pre-existing condition or your current landscape or your current bucket of resilience or resilience, whatever. So that's your status. Did you sleep? When did you eat last? Did somebody just, bully you outside your door? Or did you just find out that you're going to have to pull 3 teeth because they're infected? Whatever. That will raise your traumatizability. And then you have whatever meaning it holds for you. So for everybody else, it's like, what do you mean? It was just a football game and you lost, but we went back home and we played the next one, we won, and everybody was happy. You didn't do anything wrong. And for you, it was, yeah, but my big brother was there watching it. And I told him we were really good. And I was so proud. And when we failed, I felt like I was forever doomed in his eyes to be a failure. And his brother might not even know about this. So it doesn't have to be extrinsically visible for anybody. And then there's the third component. So your resilience and the meaning, and then it's the sense of it being inescapable. Because if you can escape from it, you can resolve it. It's not traumatic. If you can, freeze and just go unnoticed and it works out, then you're cool. If you can flee from it, then next time I'll just flee. That's not traumatic. If you were cornered and you actually fought your way out of it and you're feeling, gee, I was stronger than I thought. If this happens again, I'll just fight my way out of it. And the last resort is actually playing dead, which happens with a lot of physical abuse. You go limp, but you're not asleep. You're not fainted. You're just what we call, it's called flop because they need Fs. So freeze, flight, fight, flop. And then you have fawning, which is a more long-term traumatic response. You're actually trying to become friends with your perpetrator in order to survive. And there you have the Stockholm syndrome and all that. So any one of these are a sign that you perceived something, because if none of them works and you're still ending up hurt, that is traumatic. And the trauma is that if this happens again, I won't be able to escape. And so that might or might not be true. So it can be resolved.
Yeah. Thank you. As you say that, kind of linking that in to say, boarding school or people who are a childhood and they can't get away. I found that for myself, I've not heard the flop before, but certainly the fight and the flee, those things weren't really possible at school because you were there. The only way really was to get expelled, to leave school. If you said I'm unhappy, they say, oh, well, you're homesick, you'll get over it. So the fighting, certainly in my school, that was really frowned upon. And I hear that in a lot of schools, that was frowned upon. And I found the freeze, so I froze emotionally, or fawning, trying to make friends with people, roll over and be dead almost. And I often hear that from people who come to me who say, I have no needs, that and that for me is very much the fawn. So yes, I can really resonate with those. So I'd love you to, so thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'd love you to share a little bit of maybe what you've done in Africa, and how you've started to help resolve those 5 aspects using the tapping and the havening.
Yeah. So the idea is very simple. The younger you are, the more vulnerable you are, because when you're an infant, you cannot provide for food or safety. And then you're gradually growing into somebody providing safety for you until you're good enough to provide it for yourself.
Mm.
So if your experiences of safety aren't met, then you're not able to do it and nobody else is either. So that means that that will affect how you approach other people. There you have kind of attachment trauma. If you have a sense of being abandoned, or abandonment is, thought of as not being loved, or if I don't behave, I'll be pushed out of the flock, and all of a sudden you're in a flock where the normal flock for people up to at least 12, 15, 16 is to have two parents providing major support, some elders and some siblings. And that's a fairly right-sized tribe to allow you to build your defenses and learn how to handle life. If you're thrown into a situation with lots more people, less grown-ups, and a more authoritative system, then you learn how to fit in there in an authoritative system, which means other ways of coping and other ways of finding safety. When we work with, for example, liberated child soldiers, they could be, kidnapped at 7, at 8, and they will be taken away from their natural safety into a complete unsafety. Safety will be provided by some leader or individual who gives them magical powers, maybe, and makes them brave. Kids are very shapeable, malleable in that age. And that's why child soldiers are common, because they're cheap and they work.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's very cynic. So there you are made to invest in the culture where you need to survive. So you might need to have to commit violent acts to not have violent acts be committed to you. Mm-hmm. Which means that you're getting a skewed system of what's right and wrong. And that's the culture. And a culture like that can also, a skewed culture can exist in a family system, in a boarding system, in a military system, in any system, in a workplace. So the whole question always boils down to, can I provide safety for myself, or can somebody else? And can I trust somebody else to do that? When we are safe, human beings usually resolve things. We heal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So even if they have all those experiences and they're liberated and nobody wants to have anything to do with them, so there's a center for them run by Murabazi, our colleague in Congo, where he's liberated thousands of child soldiers and sex slaves from these armed forces, young women and men. And so the first thing is they need to be able to sleep, to have safety in their own body. They need to find safety. Mm-hmm. And sleep is a very vulnerable thing, because if you're not safe, if you don't feel safe when you sleep, you basically can't relax ever. Not when you're awake and not when you're asleep. So that's why bullying and the stuff like that can go on, or just kids' jokes and pranks that can be fun for some and really traumatic for others, depending on their life history. That can really, set things in place for future depression and suicidality and whatever. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we show them the method, and the tapping is easy. Yeah. You tap a number of points on your body, and you do this twice. It's a protocol, and under the arm, and then you tap your fingers, and there's the app you can download in 27 languages. It's free. Yeah. And once you've done the round once, you breathe in, hold your breath, and you breathe out. You do this again, breathe in, hold it, and breathe out. And then you do this round again, and we can do it again later, but the whole point is that this will relax your body, whether your mind and intellect believes it or not. It's shown to lower cortisol levels, adrenaline levels, heartbeat, pulse. It just simply relaxes the nervous system. And if you have something that usually triggers you and you can relax, then all of a sudden you're owning safety. It's possible to resolve this feeling of not being safe. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to create safety, either for yourself or for somebody else, by helping them with the tapping or the havening. Mm-hmm. And if your body experiences a trigger, whatever that is, external, a sound, a smell, a situation, or internal, an idea, a dream, a memory, an interpretation, whether it comes from the outside or inside, if you react in a fight or flight way, It is a traumatic response because nothing traumatic happened right now. So it's from the past. And if you calm your system down, that trigger will be restored with a new status, danger over. So that's what we do. We teach them this. So teaching is very fast. They do it with music a lot there. It's such an easy way to teach and remember stuff, and they can do it, once a day and sing and play drums together, actually doing the tapping. And usually for most of them, if they do that daily for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and if they get anxiety attacks, or if they're triggered, or if they become aggressive, or if they get cravings, if they've gone into self-medication or something like that, if they do the tapping or the havening, when that trigger is there, it is restored, but checked off the danger list.
Yes.
And that's called memory reconsolidation or depotentiation. So it's a self-help, and it's a help for the others. And the thing that, if you take really traumatic experiences, some people have no memories from before age of X. They say, I don't have any memories. I know I've seen pictures of myself, but I don't have a lot of memories. That's because probably you were fairly stressed out for whatever reason, and your brain wasn't happily recording cool stuff to look at in the future. And another thing that can show you that there might have been stress is that you have a memory, but it's only like bits and pieces. It's not a continuous film. You remember talking, and then somebody said something, and then the car went, the wheels started skidding. The next thing you know, there was an ambulance. So the movie has been interrupted. And every time you think about that car accident, you go into a kind of physical defense state with your body, which means it's still traumatic for the body, which means you will never be able to look at it and mentalize it and go, I wish we had done this instead, or next time I'm going to look out for that, or we shouldn't drive when it's raining, whatever. But those thoughts are stopped because you have that physiological reaction. So by instead just touching ever so lightly by that memory, and maybe doing havening, you can try that. It's you rub your hands together like this.
Yeah.
So more slowly, like you have a glass pearl between them. You don't want to crush it. You don't want to drop it. So now if you connect, and here's the deal. When we do this over Zoom, I ask you to just slightly wag from left to right like I'm doing. The reason for this is that's fine motor skills. And if you were to have a traumatic reaction, even ever so small, you would stop wagging and I would know. So it's just a safety belt, as we do this. And now havening is this thing you're doing with your hands. And now ask yourself, is there any specific memory you have of your childhood or recently or something that when you think about it, usually you don't feel great?
I don't necessarily think so. I've spent so many years tapping on all the memories.
Person you miss, person you weren't happy you met. Situation you wish would have resolved in a different way, but it didn't.
Yeah, I think, maybe there is one. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you think about it, usually you just measure from 0 to 10. So from 0 to 10, if 10 is too much and 0 is absolutely neutral, where on that scale would this sensation be right now?
So 3 or a 4.
Yeah, 3 or 4. And like it's called subjective. So I have no idea what that means to you. If you're a really tough guy, 3 or 4 could be enough to, make me pass out. And if it's the other way around, 3 or 4 would be a tickle under the foot of me, and the opposite for you. Yes. So that's why all trauma is subjective.
Yeah.
You can't take it away from somebody. If they say, I experienced this and I really, it's enough. I feel like I could kill myself for it. Other people might go, that's silly. And it isn't. So now I'll just show you the simple havening, and we can go back to the tapping. So what you do now is you do this over your shoulders. You can still wag a bit from side to side just so I have that measurement of you. That's fine. And then, as we do this, you can just repeat some numbers after me. I'll say 55.
55.
62.
62.
88.3.
88.3.
384.
384.
Okay. What's your favorite pet?
Cat.
Cat. How do you spell it backwards?
TAC.
TAC. There you go. Okay. And then you can try your face also. This is called face havening. It's as if washing your face. And so there was a study, 2012, Harper et al., Taming the Amygdala, which showed that doing these touches we're doing now and also tapping actually will lower your cortisol and heartbeat. And it's not like they're going, and we know why, but they did measure it and it works. And if you do face havening this way, the other way around, your brain, your brain goes, what? Is that my left hand or my right hand? Is somebody else doing this? It's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
So that was a bit of havening, and I added this movement just to have that safety belt as we're doing this over Zoom. And now I ask you, if you now connect back to that situation that we talked about earlier, what do you find is different now?
Yeah, it's probably a 2 or a 3. There was a moment there, I had a few tears like start to bubble up there. So
now when you reconnected?
Yeah.
And you didn't have those tears when you connected to the first time. It was only a 2 or 3, but it wasn't like tears were welling up. So that's what I call the layers of the onion, right? There was this one feeling, which was 2 or 3 when we started. And now something is different because tears well up. So it's probably not the same reaction. So we might have resolved this reaction. And now we moved in to the next layer of whatever that is connected to that. Are people watching this?
Yes, people will be watching.
So we'll do a tapping on that immediately. We'll see whatever the difference is. So you just take 2 fingers and you go on this hand, and I'll be asking you just to do that slight movement because it tells me that you're okay. Now, if we'd been sitting in front of each other, I might not ask you to do that.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's funny when you engage your fine motor skills, you can't panic because when you panic, you lose your fine motor skills.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So look for that feeling now and see if you can raise it from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Can you do that?
Yeah.
So where is it now?
Yeah, I guess 4 or 5.
Right. And, let's just leave it there. And if you, with a mere thought, can raise it from 2 to 5, then, there is something there and we don't know what it is, but it's a reaction to something. And when you raised it, do you use an image in your mind or a memory or a sound or?
It's a feeling, I think.
Okay. So just getting in touch with the feeling. So where in your body is that feeling?
Solar plexus, heart.
Solar plexus, heart. And where in your heart?
Yes, at the bottom.
At the bottom. And what is that like at the bottom of your heart?
Guess, like a rock, pebble.
Yeah. So go to your cheek. So like a rock. What kind of rock is that rock?
It'd be a gray rock.
Yeah. And what does rock know about feeling?
Heaviness. Not a lot on one level. A rock. It's kind of solid.
How big is it? Under the armpit?
Probably, an inch, a couple of centimeters.
Yeah. So what's the surface like?
Smooth.
So like a pebble on a beach?
Yeah.
So, if there was like a million years of water and rain going over that pebble on the beach, what would happen to it?
Yeah, become very smooth.
Yeah, very small, wouldn't it?
And
how smooth and small do you think it would be able to become?
Be nice to turn it into sand.
Yeah. And sand can be very smooth, can't it?
Yeah.
You know the sensation of sand under your feet?
Yeah.
The difference between warm sand and wet sand and yeah. You go back here. And what we're doing now is all this talk we're doing, that's actually what we talked about in the beginning. That's the clean language.
Mm-hmm.
And because clean language is about finding whatever metaphor it is for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we explore the metaphor instead of exploring the issue.
Yeah.
And instead of talking about what we think about it, we just explore the metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that like at the bottom of your heart right now? Is that grain of sand or is it smooth pebble?
Yeah, more sand.
Yeah. And when that is more sand, how does that feel?
Feels more fluid, more malleable.
Yeah. So just try to take a deep breath. Hold it. Breathe out. One more. Breathe out. And there's always two rounds.
Mm.
And some say that it's to make it last for 5 minutes. Some say that it's because the second time the body goes, I know what you're doing and I can relax even more. And some say, that certain points on your nervous system coincide with acupuncture points and acupressure points and reach different parts of the nervous system. And we usually say, yeah, to all of it. So tell me something. If that was grain of sand, what is in your solar plexus right now?
Well, what comes to me is a sunflower.
Yeah. And how is it to have a sunflower in your solar plexus? Is that good or bad?
Kind of feels neutral.
Yeah. And how does it feel in your heart having sand instead of pebble?
That feels better, more fluid.
Yeah. So better, more fluid and neutral. So this tapping can be done without any talk at all. And that's also fully possible. That's how we work when we work in large vulnerable communities instead of talking.
Yeah.
But right now, since we're talking about different ways of doing that, I'm just showing you and explaining to you all these different modalities and why they can be useful. One part of it is not talking about what that thing was, instead of creating calm and focusing on something else. That teaches your nervous system that we don't need to cling on to this sensation because it's safe to talk about something else. So it's moving it down on the list of priorities.
Yeah.
It's not the ticking suitcase anymore. Yeah. It's the sunflower.
It's interesting. I grew up on a beach.
There you go.
I used to love growing sunflowers. So there we go. As a young boy.
That's the beauty of the mind. It serves you whatever is needed. So it's telling you there's, here's some good stuff from the past. Why not use that? Yeah. And now you take a deep breath in. You hold it and you breathe out. And you do it one more time. And you breathe out. And now just notice what is different.
Yeah. There feels to be more flow. I can feel more emotion, actually. It's like maybe some tears bubbling. I don't know, I don't see tears as a bad thing, but which more open-hearted. Yeah, thank you.
So you notice a difference and more open-hearted and relaxed. So it's actually, it wouldn't be really helpful to ask, where's that 2-3 now? Because you don't have that feeling anymore. But the feeling that previously felt like 2 or 3, where is that number now?
Yeah, so it's probably a 0 because it's something different now. Yeah.
So that's a change of state.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's quite different from the EFT that I've done before. So yeah, that's really fascinating. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I realize we've only got about 10 minutes
But
left.
we had some more questions. We can sweep through them, like a downhill skier in Sweden in the winter.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you said how receptive were people in the beginning?
Yeah,
Some
yeah,
people would be like, it looks like a joke.
yeah.
And how do you think that would help me?
Mm,
And this would be people who have been through like genocide and war and all kinds of things. And we said, well, we actually believe that it would be better for you to try it, and then you tell us what it does instead of us trying to convince you.
mm.
And they do it, and they'd walk away, and they'd come back the next day, and they say, it still looks stupid, but I slept for the first time in 16 years, and nobody was in my bedroom and in my dreams.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I think that's maybe something that people have resistance when I share with ex-boarders. I think one of the things, as we shared before we began, is this idea that boarding school or separating from families at age 4, 6, 8, 11 is not seen as trauma in this country. It's seen as privilege, which is often, whereas people say, okay, well, there was a war-torn situation. I can understand that's trauma. What happened to me, that's not trauma. So I'm not going to try anything. It's often for me who comes to me, it's the partners. They
I
say,
usually turn that around and I say, is there any area in your life that is not playing out the way you would like it to? And if they say yes, I'd say, you know what? Let's not give it a label, but do you want to resolve it?
yeah. Interesting.
Because the thing is this, you can't really decide if a person is traumatized or not unless they react traumatically. And once they do, it doesn't matter if something happened that anybody knows or not. And to be a child is traumatic. You suddenly realize Santa Claus doesn't exist. Wow, big trauma. Or somebody dies. That's another kind of trauma. And it all depends. That's what we keep saying. It all depends. If something in your life isn't playing out the way you'd like it to, if you're having long periods of self-doubt or not feeling good about stuff for yourself, or losing hope, or not enjoying things the way you used to do, or everybody else is laughing and you're not, that's a sign that there could be a psychological, emotional, mental issue unresolved that your brain is chugging at 24/7 under your conscious mind trying to resolve. And if you're drinking more than usual or more than other people, or you find yourself self-medicating in other ways, like seeking the thrill of adrenaline or intensity, or seeking the fire and or there's the calm, all of those things are ways of self-medicating, which is natural, trauma, which is natural. And if you grow up in a boarding situation, privilege can be a trauma in itself. I mean, it's if you're the only privileged person among a lot of people who aren't, then you will find it traumatic because you won't be making any friends. Because you're too far away from each other. So people who share experiences will probably be able to feel more at ease with others that have had the same experiences. But no doubt there's a difference growing up, finding safety in a flock that isn't your flock, or finding safety in a flock that is extremely nurturing and caring. And it doesn't really matter if one of those is a boarding situation, or one of those is social services, family placement, or if it is a family, or if it is a dysfunctional family. All the same. Well, life doesn't play out the way we want. It's because something is stopping us.
Yeah. Wow.
Was there a lot of bullying?
I think what comes up at boarding school, I think, is people there is bullying, but it's usually just one person per year. But what happens with the rest of the people, they self-regulate, so they bully themselves. It's that internal dialogue, the inner critic. Again, so
I call it the inner hypnotist. If you keep telling yourself you're worthless, sooner or later you will believe it.
Yeah. So again, it's that thing that you might have not been the bullied one there, but you watched it happen. And in order to not cry or not get angry or not do one of the behaviors that's going to get bullied, you will hate that part of yourself. You will beat that part up. So there is bullying, but
and there's also, but I would like to add to that there's also survivor's guilt. You saw it happen, you could have intervened, you didn't because you didn't know how. And afterwards, you might ask yourself, you find out 20 years later that person actually suicided or something. You're going to be like, shit, I wonder if I was a silent part of that.
Yeah. Interesting. So I realize we've just got a few minutes left. So you've shared techniques with us. You've shared, obviously the impact of these tools have, revolutionized the people's lives. So what I'm hearing is, I'll put some links at the bottom so people can visit your website, because you've got the video there, and also on YouTube I've watched some of the songs, and the invitation would be just to tap along, to think of something that is bothering you lightly, and then just to
we actually have all three techniques. We have the self-havening and the trauma tapping and the a breathing technique on a site called worldwidestressrelief.org. Where you can join a 5-day challenge and be a part of a study with Bond University and Dr. Peter Stapleton and us.
Okay.
Or you just look at the movies and try them out.
Yeah. And it's just, do you find that you have to kind of remember all the different separate memories, or is it just the feeling
So what my recommendation is, it's like soap and water. If you get your hands dirty, use it. If you're going to eat, use it anyhow. If you're going to bed, use it anyhow. It's the same with this. So you run into a situation where you react in a way you're not happy with, and you can't really explain it. You just feel uneasy or queasy or anxious or angry or irritable. Well, that's a conditioned reaction. So while you're connected to that emotion, you follow one of those movies and you do it. And that will resolve that one. And next time it happens, you take that one. And we're pattern generalization creatures, which means once you've done 2 or 3 situations, your body will start doing that by itself.
Okay.
And, sometimes you need, maybe if you want to use it the other way around, to create resilience, because normally you're okay, but lately you've been irritable, then maybe your life load is a little bit too much. So regardless of why that is, you can just start doing follow the tapping movie before you fall asleep, and your sleep will be better because you're releasing daily stress so you can go into deep sleep. And then when you wake up, you can do it in the morning just to lower your stress if you had any dreams, whether you remember them or if not, and just get ready for the day. And it takes 3 to 5 minutes, like brushing teeth, and you're increasing your resilience and you're creating a better you. The best you possible, which is the unstressed one.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, it's been fascinating, and I could speak to you for another hour. So
yeah, we'll do that later sometime.
Yeah, or maybe we'll do another.
I think it's great that you're targeting this, and I think it's great that you're shedding light on the fact that if you grow up in a specific situation, there will be specific things that are different from other people. Some things in childhood are the same for everybody, and some things will be different depending on how your safety was provided, where could you go for help, what happened, what were you taught, what are your coping strategies. And I think boarding is a big change in everything. So I do believe that it's really good just to think about it,
Yeah.
What if some of my strategies actually come because I was there, and if so, are they functional or not?
Yeah. And when people, you talk about in the book here, and for people, please do buy a copy of this or visit the website, and I'll put the links below. But you talk about some of the symptoms, very common for ex-boarders: anxiety, depression, alcoholism, workaholism, and you say these are common things for symptoms for trauma. So I need to leave you to go to another meeting.
That's cool. Yeah.
But I will put the links in the description below for people to reach out to you. And please do go and support them. They're doing amazing work. And I feel very inspired. I lived in Africa for a while, so I'd love to join you one time. So
yeah, what part of Africa?
I went to Ghana and Togo.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. I went there for a year working in my 20s.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thanks for spreading stuff, and have anybody who's listening to this, if you have one takeaway, anxiety and your darkest responses are not there as a problem, obstruction, or something you need to medicate. It's a signal of something that was programmed to help you, and you can resolve it if it's not doing what it should anymore. So there's an excellent book called The Upside of Your Dark Side. Get to know and learn how to use your darker emotions. Anger is excellent to get out of, to win the last 100 yards of a marathon. Kumbaya is not going to cut it when, when you're trying to deplete every single cell in your body to be the first one.
Yes. Thank you. I'll have a look out for that book. So thank you very much, Ulf.
Thanks.
Pleasure. And thank you so much for what you're doing. Okay.
Excellent.
Bye-bye.